In 190, the Eastern Han Dynasty central government in the capital at Luoyang languished under the control of Dong Zhuo, a domineering military commander from the northwestern frontier. Dong Zhuo had deposed the 13-year-old Emperor Shao and replaced him with Emperor Shao's 8-year-old half-brother Emperor Xian, leading to widespread discontent across the empire. With the central government's control of the provinces already tenuous after decades of misrule, a number of local officials rebelled against Dong Zhuo, forcing Dong Zhuo to relocate the central government westward to Chang'an while burning Luoyang to the ground on his way out. The warlords allied against Dong Zhuo attacked Luoyang from 4 directions. The northernmost prong was led by Yuan Shao, the governor of Bohai Commandery in Ji province. Yuan Shao, likely around 40 years old at the time, was nominated by the allies to lead their coalition, in part because he had been a highly vocal critic of Dong Zhuo, and in part because he came from the Yuan clan of Runan, one of the most influential political families in China. Yuan Shao stationed his army in Henei Commandery, only a short distance to the north of Luoyang across the Yellow River. The southernmost prong was led by Yuan Shu, the younger half-brother of Yuan Shao, although legally the two were cousins because Yuan Shao had been posthumously adopted by his heirless uncle. Significant tensions were developing between the two brother cousins over who would control their family's vast political capital. Even though Yuan Shao was older, his mother was a concubine, whereas Yuan Shu's mother was the formal wife, and the status of one's mother mattered a great deal in traditional Confucian society. Unlike the politically savvy Yuan Shao, Yuan Shu was pugnacious, impulsive, and liked to overestimate his own abilities. He stationed his army in Nanyang Commandery, to the south of Luoyang. In addition to the Yuan brother cousins, Kong Zhou, the inspector of Yu province, gathered his army in Yingchuan Commandery to the southeast of Luoyang, while Liu Dai, the inspector of Yan province and a distant member of the imperial family, gathered his army in Chenliu Commandery directly to the east of Luoyang. Liu Dai's army, over 100,000 strong, was likely the largest of the 4 armies. It consisted of the soldiers of various governors and chancellors, mostly from Yan province, as well as those of an independent politician named Cao Cao. Cao Cao came from the family of a eunuch. His father was the adopted son of a prominent eunuch. Although he had been a sly and deceptive youth who was often criticized by his elders for idling his time away rather than studying the Confucian texts, he still grew up to become a stern, idealistic young man who successfully obtained a filial and incorruptible nomination by only 20 years old. In Cao Cao's time, it was fashionable for members of high society to have their characters rated by social critics, as one's reputation played a significant role in his career prospects. 2 different versions of Cao Cao's evaluation by one such critic were recorded in the ancient texts. In one version, Cao Cao was told he would become a villain in times of peace, but a hero in times of chaos, while in the other, much more famous version mentioned in the novel The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he was described as a capable minister in times of peace, but a villain in times of chaos. It is perhaps only fitting that a highly polarizing figure like Cao Cao will have 2 diametrically opposite versions of the same character evaluation recorded about him. One of Cao Cao's first appointments was as the security chief for a district of Luoyang, during which he executed an uncle of Jian Shuo, one of Emperor Ling's favorite eunuchs, for breaking the curfew, perhaps to show the Confucian elites such as Yuan Shao, with whom he was childhood friends, that even though he came from a eunuch's family, he was not like the rest of them. He later fought against the Yellow Turban rebels and was eventually appointed to be the chancellor of Jinan Principality in the far eastern Qing province, where he again ruffled feathers by dismissing many local officials for corruption. At the time, Jinan Principality had many temples dedicated to a local cult, and the cost of maintaining them was placing significant burdens on the local population. Cao Cao banned the practice in his district and ordered the temples destroyed. He eventually received appointments in the central government, but his hatred for Dong Zhuo led to his fleeing Luoyang for Yan province, where he raised a 5,000-strong army under the supervision of his friend Zhang Miao, the governor of Chenliu, and subsequently joined forces with Liu Dai. The leaders of the allied armies were intimidated by Dongzhuo's veteran army and sat idly by as he burned down Luoyang, forcibly relocated its population westward, and looted the mausoleums of the Eastern Han Dynasty emperors. Cao Cao chastised his colleagues for their fecklessness and then attacked Dongzhuo's defenses with his fledgling army, suffering catastrophic losses in the process. He subsequently raised another army and this time joined forces with Yuan Shao. As the inaction of the allies continued, the Yan province army ran out of food, began infighting, and dispersed, while the Yu province army disappeared from the historical records. Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu continued to loiter around Luoyang, but still avoided direct confrontation against Dongzhuo. The coalition's weakness against Dongzhuo emphasizes a key ancient Chinese geopolitical principle, the divide between East and West, or Shandong and Shanxi. Nowadays, Shandong, east of the mountain, and Shanxi, west of the mountain, are two provinces named after their locations relative to the Taihang Mountains. But for much of Chinese history, the mountains in question were the Xiao or Hua Mountains, two northern spurs of the Qin Mountains. In this sense, Shanxi refers to the more mountainous west, especially the Guanzhong region around the Wei River Valley and Chang'an, whereas Shandong refers to the open plains of the east. For almost all of Chinese history, Shandong has been richer, more populated, and more culturally influential than Shanxi, but Shanxi, well protected by mountains and close to the northwestern frontier, was usually more militarily significant and therefore had outsized political influence relative to its population. Relocating the court to Chang'an placed Dongzhuo in an easily defensible region close to his home in Liang province. But the northwest also only had a registered population of several million at the time, in sharp contrast to the more than 30 million people who lived in Shandong. By moving the capital westward, Dongzhuo effectively abnegated his responsibility to most of the Chinese population. Chaos ensued. Although the events that will play out over the ensuing 4 decades are some of the most famous in Chinese history, especially as they feature heavily in the novel The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, much of it, paradoxically, remains poorly understood. This is in part because the events were incredibly complex to begin with, thus making them good source materials for a popular novel, and in part because the novel, as a famous saying about it goes, is supposed to be 70% historically accurate and 30% fictional. But with so many events in the novel now deeply ingrained in the general Chinese cultural consciousness, it can be extremely difficult for us to separate the 70% from the remaining 30%. While much of the novel follows the historical records closely, many sections still diverge significantly from history. One such divergence was the important role that the warlord Sun Jian played during this time period, most of which was left out of the novel. Sun Jian was born in 155, the same year as Cao Cao, in Wu Commandery of the remote southeastern Yang province. His family was undistinguished, even if his children went on to claim that they descended from Sun Wu, the author of The Art of War, who was supposed to have been active in the region around Wu Commandery almost 700 years prior. Sun Jian was a risk-taker from a young age. By his late teens, he had already on one occasion single-handedly fought off a large group of bandits, and on another occasion raised a militia to put down a local rebellion. For these accomplishments, he was promoted to various county-level government positions in neighboring Xu province, which during times of peace might have been the ceiling of his career. But with the empire in desperate need for soldiers during the Yellow Turban Rebellion of 184, Sun Jian joined the army at the head of a volunteer force some 1,000 strong and rapidly rose through the ranks. He later fought in the northwest against rebelling Qiang tribesmen, serving alongside Dongzhuo in the process. In 187, Sun Jian was appointed, rather unusually for a soldier, as the civilian governor of Changsha Commandery in the mid-Yangtze Jing province to put down a local rebellion. The rebels, collectively described as Shanzei, or literally mountain bandits, consisted mostly of commoners who fled to remote regions of the Han Empire to escape poverty, eventually joining the militias of the local elites there, along with members of aboriginal groups. As central authority declined in the 180s, mountain bandits such as the ones in Changsha became a common source of instability across China. Sun Jian easily defeated the rebels in Changsha and its neighboring commanderies, and was subsequently ennobled as a marquis, the highest noble rank that a person outside of the imperial family could obtain during the Eastern Han Dynasty. Still only in his early 30s, he had already risen to one of the most elevated positions in China. Sun Jian eagerly answered Yuan Shao's call to arms against Dong Zhuo, but as he led his army northward from Changsha, he mutinied against the inspector of Jing province, against whom he held grudges, and forced the inspector to commit suicide. Sun Jian continued his northward march, with the ranks of his army swelling into the tens of thousands with new recruits. After entering Nanyang, the northernmost commandery in Jing province, Sun Jian asked its governor for food supplies, but was refused. Sun Jian responded by also murdering the governor of Nanyang. The rapid murder of two well-connected politicians immediately turned Sun Jian into a political outcast, although Yuan Shu, still stationed in northern Nanyang commandery with his army, did not mind. Yuan Shu allied with Sun Jian to seize Nanyang, one of the richest, most populated, and most politically influential commanderies in China. Meanwhile, in response to the destruction that Sun Jian had left behind in Jing province, Dong Zhuo appointed Liu Biao, a highly accomplished Confucian scholar and another distant member of the imperial family, to serve as the new provincial inspector. Liu Biao arrived in Jing province with little practical means to impose his authority, but still quickly stabilized his rule there by winning the support of key local elites in the southern commandery. He went on to set up his base at Xiangyang, a previously obscure city on the south bank of the Han River that controlled the main north-south travel corridor through the Mid-Yangtze region. Liu Biao also made temporary peace with Yuan Shu by officially nominating him as the new governor of Nanyang. Sun Jian, despite all of his hustle to destabilize Jing province, ended up with nothing. Nonetheless, Yuan Shu continued to capitalize on Sun Jian's military prowess by nominating him as the new inspector of neighboring Yu province. The nomination was just a formality, since Yuan Shu was still in open rebellion against the central government, but it still gave Sun Jian the excuse he needed to claim Yu province for himself. The earlier inspector of Yu province, Kong Zhou, had disappeared from history by then, and the inspectorship was possibly vacant. As the new nominal head of Yu province, Sun Jian launched northwestward attacks against Dong Zhuo in the winter of 190 to 191. After suffering initial setbacks, he managed to kill Dong Zhuo's general Hua Xiong, and then directly defeated Dong Zhuo in battle against great odds, forcing Dong Zhuo to finally abandon Luoyang. But with the city and its surrounding countryside in ruins, Sun Jian's army quickly ran out of food supplies and was forced to withdraw. During his brief stay in Luoyang, Sun Jian's soldiers recovered from a well the Great Seal of State, a symbol of imperial authority, that had been lost during the recent disorders of 189. Sun Jian took control of the Great Seal and later turned it over to Yuan Shu. Order continued to fall apart across China. Large regions of the mountainous Bing province in the north were occupied by yellow turban remnants known as the White Wave rebels, as well as Xiongnu tribesmen who were migrating southward in increasing numbers. The Taihang Mountains separating Bing and Ji provinces was frequented by a loose confederation of bandits known as the Black Mountain Rebels under its leader Zhang Yan, who nominally held government positions as part of an amnesty deal. Even further to the east, the coastal Qing and Xu provinces were both devastated by large marauding armies of yellow turban remnants. Unlike the provinces to its south, the far northeastern You province remained fairly stable under Liu Yu, a distant member of the imperial family who had been governor since 188, when he was sent there to suppress a large rebellion by a semi-nomadic people named the Wu Huan. Liu Yu easily restored peace in You province by offering amnesty to the rebels outside of a few key leaders, and under his governance, the local economy even thrived thanks to the opening of new markets along the frontier. Over 1 million refugees, mostly from Qing and Xu provinces, settled in You province. Liu Yu was so successful that Yuan Shao tried to establish a new government with Liu Yu as the new emperor, a highly inappropriate proposal for an influential politician like Yuan Shao to be making. Yuan Shao was widely eviscerated for this proposal, and only gave up when Liu Yu adamantly refused to collaborate. But despite Liu Yu's popularity, he still faced open opposition from a local military commander named Gong Sun Zan, who clashed with Liu Yu over his soft treatment of the Wu Huan. Gong Sun Zan began to aggressively expand his influence, both in You province and elsewhere. Han Fu, the governor of Ji province, suddenly found himself threatened by Gongsun Zan to his north, the Yellow Turbans to his east, and the Black Mountain rebels to his west, not to mention Yuan Shao, still stationed in Henei Commandery to his south. Even though Yuan Shao, as the governor of Bohai Commandery, was Han Fu's subordinate, Han Fu still owed Yuan Shao significant social obligations because he had previously received patronage from the Yuan clan of Runan. To further complicate matters, Han Fu and much of the Ji province leadership came from Yingchuan Commandery, which bordered Runan, and many of Han Fu's subordinates likely felt more personal loyalty to Yuan Shao than they did to him. Sensing an opportunity, Yuan Shao secretly encouraged Gongsun Zan to invade Ji province from the north. As Han Fu's army suffered defeats against Gongsun Zan, several of Han Fu's subordinates from Yingchuan, all of whom were allies of Yuan Shao, suggested to Han Fu that given the significant threats facing Ji province, perhaps it would be good for his personal safety to abdicate to Yuan Shao. Han Fu agreed, handing one of the richest, most stable Chinese provinces to Yuan Shao. As much as Han Fu is widely mocked today for his meekness, he likely would have been removed via a coup had he not complied. He was also a scholar with negligible military experience, who had suddenly found himself in the midst of a societal collapse, and understandably just wanted to peace out. As the new head of Ji province, Yuan Shao quickly gathered a large supporting cast of politicians around him. Some had already joined Yuan Shao in Henei, including Pang Ji, who helped Yuan Shao devise the plan to seize Ji province, Xu You, an influential politician from Nanyang Commandery, and Cao Cao, who was friends with both Xu You and Yuan Shao. Others were Han Fu's former subordinates from Yingchuan, who invited Yuan Shao into Ji province. Still others were local Ji province elites whom Yuan Shao successfully incorporated into his nascent administration, including Zhuo, who had previously served as Han Fu's attendant officer, one of the most important positions in the provincial administration. Elites such as Zhuo provided Yuan Shao with a critically important local support that he needed to maintain his rule in Ji province. Yuan Shao set up his base at the city of Ye, the seat of Wei Commandery in the southern tip of Ji province. Although Ye was situated on the open plains, it remained well protected by the Taihang Mountains to its west and the Yellow River to its east and south, with the nearby Zhang River providing it with water for irrigation and navigation. From Ye, Yuan Shao quickly became one of the leading warlords in the region of Hebei, meaning north of the Yellow River. As Yuan Shao consolidated his rule in Ji province, Zhuo proposed for him a strategy for future expansion: eastward into Qing province to defeat the Yellow Turbans, westward toward the Taihang Mountains to defeat the Black Mountain Bandits, northward into You province to defeat Liu Yu and Gongsun Zan, and then further northward into You and Bing provinces to defeat the Xiongnu and other barbarian groups there. With these four northern provinces under his control, Yuan Shao could then seize control of the central government to become the hegemon warlord in China, and then subdue any remaining warlord who might dare to challenge him. Yuan Shao appreciated Zhuo's strategic thinking and promoted Zhuo to be the inspector of the army. While Yuan Shao was taking over Ji province, Gongsun Zan was also expanding southward, nominating an ally named Tian Kai as the inspector of Qing province. He also competed with Yuan Shao for influence in Yan province, whose eastern commandery was especially important to Yuan Shao, as it bordered Ji province and controlled a number of important Yellow River crossings. Yuan Shao sent Cao Cao into the eastern commandery to fight off marauding bands of the Black Mountain rebels and the Xiongnu, and subsequently installed Cao Cao as its new governor. Cao Cao began to establish a fledgling administration under him, relying especially heavily on the administrative talents of Xun Yu from the Xun clan of Yingchuan. Xun Yu's grandfather Yuan Shu was a leading scholar of his day, while his uncle Xun Shuang was one of the three excellencies in Dongzhuo's government. Xun Yu had previously joined his older brother, who was serving under Yuan Shao, at Ye, but soon grew dissatisfied and went over to Cao Cao. In addition to his influence in Qing and Yan provinces, Gongsun Zan also enjoyed good relations with Yuan Shu and Sun Jian further south. Two alliances of warlords thus emerged, one consisting of Gongsun Zan, Tian Kai, Yuan Shu, and Sun Jian, and the other consisting of Yuan Shao, Cao Cao, and Liu Biao. The intra-family feud between Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu was growing increasingly vitriolic, with Yuan Shu declaring that Yuan Shao is not a true son of the Yuan clan, and that Yuan Shao is our family slave. Yuan Shao intervened in the Central Plains by appointing his own inspector in Sun Jian's Yu province, only for Sun Jian to immediately push Yuan Shao's inspector out. In the winter of 191 to 192, as Sun Jian's success continued to grow, he joined Yuan Shu to attack Liu Biao to their south. He again won rapid victories, this time against Liu Biao's general Huang Zu. But one evening, as he recklessly led a pursuit of escaping enemy soldiers on the outskirts of Xiangyang, he fell into an ambush and was killed. He was only in his mid-30s and bowed out of history just as he was beginning to leave his mark. In early 192, Gongsun Zan drove deep into southern Ji province with an army 30,000 strong, only to suffer an unexpected defeat against Yuan Shao near Jieqiao. Fighting continued between Yuan Shao and Gongsun Zan over the following year across the north, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage over the other. While the east was falling into worsening chaos, the central government in the west under the direct control of Dong Zhuo was also falling apart. In addition to claiming the position of Xiangguo, the Chancellor of State, which already went against Eastern Han Dynasty political norms because it placed him above the three excellencies, who were normally the three joint heads of the civilian bureaucracy, Dong Zhuo also revived for himself the highly prestigious ancient honorific of Tai Shi, literally the Grand Master. Not that any of this mattered. He controlled the army. He could do whatever he wanted anyway. Dong Zhuo also just flat out did not know how to govern. He awarded many of his relatives high government positions and noble titles while wantonly putting to death important officials for committing even minor offenses against him. He reveled in public displays of cruelty. In one notorious incident, as many high-ranking officials gathered to host a feast honoring Dong Zhuo, he brought in hundreds of captives and had them tortured to death in front of the petrified officials. Short on cash, he ordered vast sums of inferior coins to be minted, leading to worsening economic instability. He split his time between Chang'an and a castle in the countryside over 100 kilometers to the west named Meiwu, Mei for Mei County, where it was located, and Wu meaning a small obstacle or castle. Meiwu functioned as a safe space for Dong Zhuo, who had vast quantities of treasures, along with 30 years of food supplies, stocked there. In Dong Zhuo's own words, even if he were to fail in all of his ambitions, he would still try to live out the rest of his life in Meiwu. But no amount of fortifications could protect Dong Zhuo from his human rivals. Tensions grew between Dong Zhuo and one of his top generals, Lü Bu, who also frequently served as Dong Zhuo's bodyguard. Dong Zhuo had a horrible temper, and on one occasion threw a halberd at Lü Bu during a dispute, the ancient equivalent of firing a gun in someone's direction. On another occasion, Lü Bu had an affair with one of Dong Zhuo's concubines. These two stories are merged and dramatized in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms as a love triangle between Dong Zhuo, Lü Bu, and a beautiful woman named Diao Chan, with Dong Zhuo throwing the halberd at Lü Bu out of jealousy. The character of Diao Chan, however famous, is purely fictional. But ultimately, the primary source of tension between Dong Zhuo and Lü Bu was still likely sociopolitical. Dong Zhuo, along with much of his army, came from Liang province, which had heavy Qiang influence, whereas Lü Bu came from neighboring Bing province with its heavy Xiongnu influence. Before he entered Dong Zhuo's service, Lü Bu had served under Ding Yuan, the inspector of Bing province, alongside other local officers, including Zhang Liao and Zhang Yang, no known relations to one another. After Lü Bu assassinated Ding Yuan to join Dong Zhuo, Zhang Liao also entered into Dong Zhuo's service, whereas Zhang Yang eventually became the governor of Henei Commandery and an ally of Yuan Shao. The Bing province soldiers under Dong Zhuo likely remained semi-independent and marginalized, leading to their growing discontent. Taking advantage of Lü Bu's frustrations, Wang Yun, the excellency of the masses, successfully convinced Lü Bu to join him in a plot against Dong Zhuo. In mid-192, as Dong Zhuo's procession was passing through a palace gate of Chang'an, one of Lü Bu's subordinates suddenly directed a halberd blow at Dong Zhuo to knock him off of his carriage. The injured Dong Zhuo called for Lü Bu's assistance, at which point Lü Bu announced Dong Zhuo's crimes before delivering the coup de grace. After Dong Zhuo's assassination, the rest of his family was quickly rounded up and killed, including, rather tragically, his almost 90-year-old mother. Dong Zhuo's death led to widespread revelry in Chang'an as people danced in the streets. His corpse was publicly displayed, and a wick was passed through his navel to convert his body into a lantern that burned for many days. After Dongzhuo's death, Wang Yun continued in his role as the excellency of the masses, while also assuming control of Emperor Xian's secretariat, or in Chinese, 尚书, literally the presentation of books. Although the Eastern Han Dynasty officials in the secretariat were significantly below the three excellencies in rank, the department nonetheless grew increasingly powerful over time because it controlled communications between emperors and the rest of the imperial bureaucracy. During the reigns of the many weak Eastern Han Dynasty emperors, the consortkins, eunuchs, and powerful ministers all liked to use the secretariat to control the bureaucracy. And so, by controlling the secretariat and with the backing of Lü Bu's army, Wang Yun gained control of the central government. With the death of Dongzhuo, perhaps the eastern warlords could have been gradually persuaded to turn over their armies to the central government, bringing an end to this period of division. But unfortunately, Wang Yun immediately began to abuse his powers, including ordering the death of Cai Yong, a widely respected scholar, for expressing sympathy towards Dongzhuo's death. Even more harmful to Wang Yun, he refused to grant amnesty to Dongzhuo soldiers from Liang province, and rumors soon spread that Wang Yun was planning to mass murder people from Liang province. Three of Dongzhuo's generals, Li Jue, Guo Si, and Zhang Ji, all of whom had been campaigning in the east at the time of Dongzhuo's assassination, were left with no choice but to march their armies toward Chang'an. The rebel ranks swelled with new recruits, and they easily captured Chang'an after brief fighting. A bloody massacre ensued, and Wang Yun, along with many other senior officials, were killed. Emperor Xian again fell under the control of the Liang province army after only a few months of reprieve. Lü Bu fled to the east, where he was especially sought after for his skills as a cavalry commander. Lü Bu and his soldiers excelled in horse archery, and Lü Bu often personally led cavalry charges in battle. But Lü Bu and his soldiers were also mercurial and poorly disciplined, causing them to bounce from serving under one warlord to another, including both Yuan Shu and Yuan Shao, as they routinely overstayed their welcomes. While order was collapsing in the west in 192, the Yellow Turbans in Qing province also invaded Yan province with a force supposedly over 1 million strong, although this included large numbers of women, children, and the elderly. Liu Dai, the inspector of Yan province, full-heartedly sought open battle and was killed, leaving members of the surviving Yan province leadership with little choice but to nominate Cao Cao as their interim inspector. Cao Cao heroically assembled an inexperienced, significantly outnumbered army against the Yellow Turbans, and after suffering initial defeats, finally forced the Yellow Turbans to retreat. Stalemate ensued. As winter approached, the Yellow Turbans ran low on food, and they offered Cao Cao a bonanza, a negotiated surrender. It is possible that the Yellow Turbans specifically chose to surrender to Cao Cao because his personal beliefs, as evidenced by his prior destruction of idols in Jinan Principality, aligned with the Yellow Turbans' religious values. Many of the soldiers facing Cao Cao were also likely to have been his former subjects in Jinan Principality, and so still appreciated Cao Cao's leadership. Over 1 million Yellow Turbans, including some 300,000 soldiers, surrendered to Cao Cao, amongst whom he selected the most fit fighting-age men to form an independent army unit named the Qing Province Corps, aka the Qingzhou Corps. The soldiers of the Qing Province Corps became noted for their loyalty to Cao Cao and only Cao Cao, and they formed the heart of Cao Cao's army in his subsequent wars. With Yuan Shao's continued support, Cao Cao became the permanent inspector of Yan province. The two men remained strong allies, especially as they protected each other's rears while they faced off against enemies in other directions. In the north, Yuan Shao continued to fight against both the Black Mountain rebels and Gongsun Zan, while also prosecuting a long, brutal campaign in Qing province against Gongsun Zan's associate Tian Kai, eventually sending his oldest son Yuan Tan to lead the war efforts there. The fighting between Yuan Shao, Gongsun Zan, and Tian Kai only stopped after Li Jue and Guo Si sent an envoy to mediate peace among them in early 193. In the south, Cao Cao also had to fight off invasions from Gongsun Zan's allies in the region, Tao Qian, the governor of Xu province, and Tian Kai, who sent his subordinate Liu Bei against Cao Cao. In the Central Plains, Yuan Shu had been significantly weakened by the death of Sun Jian and was gradually pushed out of Nanyang by Liu Biao. He redirected his efforts northward, invading Yan province in early 193 with the help of the Black Mountain rebels and Xiongnu, only for Cao Cao to decisively defeat him in battle and then pursue him southeastward across the Huai River into Yang province, where he claimed the inspectorship for himself and set up a new base at Shouchun on the south bank of the Huai River. From Shouchun, he continued to aggressively expand his influence in all directions, northward into Yu province on the Central Plains, southward towards the rest of Yang province in the lower Yangtze River basin, and eastward towards Taoqian's Xu province. Tao Qian, despite his reputation as a kindly old man thanks to the romance of the Three Kingdoms, was an ineffectual governor who abused his powers, and his authority in Xu province was rapidly deteriorating. Cao Cao also had designs on Xu province and invaded in late 193, ostensibly because his father had been robbed and murdered by local soldiers while traveling extravagantly through Xu province, and Cao Cao blamed Tao Qian for organizing a hit job. But realistically, since Cao Cao and Tao Qian already had conflicts against one another, Cao Cao may have simply wanted to strike back. Cao Cao routed Tao Qian's army near Pengcheng and then unsuccessfully besieged Tan, the traditional Han Dynasty seat of Xu province, before returning home to Yan province. Cao Cao's Xu province campaign of 193 was noted for its brutality. According to some sources, possibly exaggerated, Cao Cao ordered the massacre of hundreds of thousands of civilians near Pengcheng, many of whom were refugees from around Chang'an and Luoyang who had escaped Dong Zhuo's rule, and so many people were killed that their bodies blocked the flow of the nearby Si River. On a separate occasion, Cao Cao ordered the slaughter of every living being in 3 of Xu province's counties, not even sparing the dogs and chickens there. In the far north in late 193, even though the conflicts between Yuan Shao and Gongsun Zan had temporarily subsided, that between Gongsun Zan and Liu Yu, the governor of You province and technically Gongsun Zan's superior, worsened. Liu Yu preemptively launched a surprise attack against Gongsun Zan and besieged Gongsun Zan's fortress near modern-day Beijing, only for Gongsun Zan to launch a successful counterattack and take Liu Yu captive. Gongsun Zan initially planned to use Liu Yu as a puppet, but soon grew wary of Liu Yu's popularity and had Liu Yu publicly beheaded. This made Gongsun Zan the sole head of You province, but also led to widespread opposition against his rule. In Xu province, Tao Qian asked Tian Kai for reinforcements against Cao Cao, and Tian Kai responded by sending his subordinate Liu Bei to Xu province. Born in 161 in Zhuo Commandery near modern-day Beijing, Liu Bei was yet another distant member of the imperial family, although after 4 centuries of Han Dynasty rule, being just a distant member really wasn't all that. Liu Bei's father, a county magistrate, died young, forcing Liu Bei and his mother to temporarily make a living selling shoes and straw mats. He later studied under the local Confucian scholar Lu Zhi, who went on to lead the war efforts against the Yellow Turban Rebellion. Liu Bei was a poor student, preferring to spend his time hunting, listening to 2nd century music, and socializing, including with his classmate Gongsun Zan. He became a leader among local strongmen, financed by 2 horse merchants who likely recruited him for personal protection. At 23 years old, he joined the war against the Yellow Turbans and then bounced from one low-ranking government position to another, finally joining the army of his old friend Gongsun Zan and then becoming a subordinate of Gongsun Zan's ally Tian Kai. Liu Bei is one of the central figures in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms and the closest character to serving as the novel's protagonist. In the opening chapter of the novel, he vows to restore the Han Dynasty from the destruction of the Yellow Turban Rebellion and, to this end, becomes sworn brother with Guan Yu and Zhang Fei in the famous, albeit fictional, ceremony known as the Oath of the Peach Garden. Guan Yu, with his red cheeks, flowing beard, and signature long sword, the Green Dragon Crescent Blade, and Zhang Fei, with his round eyes, thick beard, and 18-feet-long lance, are 2 of the most formidable warriors in the novel. The historical Guan Yu and Zhang Fei were subordinates of Liu Bei and not his sworn brothers, although the ancient records did note that the 3 men were close, as if they were brothers. It was common practice for military commanders during this time period to fight alongside their soldiers in battle, and Guan Yu and Zhang Fei were widely praised by both their allies and enemies as being exceptionally fearsome fighters. In the centuries immediately immediately after their deaths and long before the legends about them had the chance to develop, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei were already held as the exemplars of military commanders who displayed exceptional valor in battle. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms portrays Liu Bei as a gentle, kind-hearted man who actively cares for the plight of the common people and treats both his friends and enemies with respect. But as the 20th century writer and literary critic Lu Xun wrote, the novel oversells Liu Bei's positive qualities and actually ends up making Liu Bei appear insincere. Certainly, to many modern readers, Liu Bei comes across as a weak, overly sentimental whiner who routinely charms his way into getting what he wants. Some of Liu Bei's characterization can be traced to the historical development of the novel. Although it was likely first written by an author named Luo Guanzhong in the 1300s, the version that we read today was significantly revised in the late 1600s by two literary critics, Mao Zonggang and his father Mao Lun. The Maos were phenomenal editors who cut out many tedious portions of the novel to improve its narrative flow, and it is thanks to them that the novel has reached the height that it now enjoys. But the Maos also went out of their way to characterize Liu Bei as the ideal traditional Chinese monarch. And so even though the novel already had a pretty heavy pro-Liu Bei slant, the Maos still rewrote many passages to further emphasize Liu Bei's positive qualities, while highlighting Cao Cao's deceit, cruelty, and hunger for power as a foil to Liu Bei's character. While the historical Liu Bei, unlike many other warlords of his time, was a fairly magnanimous figure who did at times show genuine concern for the common people, he still needed to be a skilled soldier in order to survive. He also had a magnetic personality and excelled at building personal alliances with others. For all of these qualities, Liu Bei was widely respected, even by warlords much more powerful than him. There is a famous scene in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms in which Cao Cao confides in Liu Bei, telling Liu Bei that out of all the warlords in China, he only considers the two of them to be true heroes. This quote, ironically considering the extent to which the novel goes in making Liu Bei look good, actually was taken directly from the historical records. Back to our narrative. Tao Qian stationed Liu Bei as Xiao Pei, just across the border from Xu province in neighboring Yu province. Xiao Pei, meaning Little Pei, was the nickname given to Pei County to distinguish it from the much bigger Pei Principality, which it was a part of. Both Peis had produced illustrious people. Emperor Gaozu, the founding emperor of the Han Dynasty, came from Little Pei, whereas Cao Cao came from Qiao County in Big Pei. In mid-194, Cao Cao again invaded Xu province, defeating both Tao Qian and Liu Bei in battle, while again brutalizing the local population, but was forced to withdraw when a rebellion suddenly broke out against him in Yan province. The rebellion was spearheaded by Zhang Miao, the governor of Chenliu Commandery and previously a close friend of Cao Cao, and Chen Gong, a native of the Eastern Commandery who had previously supported Cao Cao but grew disillusioned by Cao Cao's harsh, no-nonsense treatment of the Yan province local elites. The rebels were supported by Lü Bu, who at that time was in nearby Henei Commandery alongside Zhang Yang, his Bing province compatriot. Lü Bu joined the rebellion because he was offered the governorship of Yan province. All of Yan province outside of three walled cities, Juancheng, Dong'e, and Fan, quickly fell to the rebels. Xun Yu, with the support of a few local officials, desperately held on until Cao Cao returned, at which point Lü Bu lifted his siege of Juancheng and retreated westward to Puyang. Cao Cao pursued Lü Bu to Puyang, where bitter fighting, followed by a stalemate, ensued. By late 194, both belligerents ran low on food supplies due to locust plagues and famines, forcing Cao Cao to return to Juancheng, while Lü Bu relocated eastward to winter in Shanyang Commandery. As Cao Cao's prospects remained dire, Yuan Shao suggested for him to send his family to Ye, perhaps as a first step in giving up his independence. Cao Cao, in one of the worst lows of his life, almost accepted Yuan Shao's offer, but ultimately held firm onto his resolve. That same winter, Tao Qian died of illness in Xu province. Although nearby Yuan Shu would have been the obvious choice to take over Tao Qian's territories, the Xu province elites disliked the domineering Yuan Shu and instead nominated the well-liked Liu Bei to lead Xu province. In the following summer of 195, a revitalized Cao Cao attacked Lü Bu in Shanyang Commandery, and after winning initial battles, dispersed his soldiers to harvest the year's wheat crops. With the economic collapse taking place across China, seizing grain supplies was becoming key strategic objectives. Lü Bu and Chen Gong attacked Cao Cao's seemingly vacant campsite, only to be routed in an ambush, forcing them to flee Yan province to seek asylum under Liu Bei in Xu province. Zhang Miao, left alone to face Cao Cao, appealed to Yuan Shu for help that never came. He was assassinated by his subordinates, and soon afterwards his family was captured by Cao Cao and killed. By the winter of 195, Cao Cao finally restored his rule in Yan province after almost 2 years. While the east remained chaotic, Guanzhong, under Li Jue and Guo Si's control since 192, continued to suffer from infighting among the military leadership, looting from soldiers, and invasions from the warlords Han Sui and Ma Teng further to the northwest in Liang province. Famines, including instances of cannibalism, broke out, and much of Guanzhong's population either died or fled elsewhere. As tensions worsened between Li Jue and Guo Si in early 195, Li Jue kidnapped Emperor Xian while Guo Si detained the senior government officials. Open fighting soon broke out between Li Jue and Guo Si, with the two refusing all attempts at mediation. Yet tens of thousands more civilians were killed in the process. After several months of fighting between Li Jue and Guo Si, their ally Zhang Ji, who had been based out of Hongnong Commandery in eastern Guangdong over the few preceding years, arrived in Chang'an and finally mediated successfully for the emperor's release. In late 195, Zhang Ji led the emperor, the ministers in the central government, and large numbers of court followers eastward to return the central government to Luoyang. But unfortunately, this bloated procession also, surprise surprise, began infighting, causing Zhang Ji to quit out of frustration. Li Jue and Guo Si were also beginning to have second thoughts about letting the emperor go so easily, and so they joined forces with Zhang Ji to re-kidnap the emperor. Emperor Xian's camp had by then become dominated by two men who, under most circumstances, would not have gotten remotely close to the emperor. One was Dong Cheng, who might have been a distant relative of Dong Zhuo, we are not sure, and the other was Yang Feng, who had a rather checkered history. He began as a leader of the White Wave bandits in Bing province before joining Li Jue's army, betrayed Li Jue to join Guo Si, and finally ended up in Emperor Xian's entourage. Yang Feng uses connections to bring over several thousand reinforcements from the White Wave bandits and the Xiongnu. The senior government officials, including the Grand Commandant Yang Biao from the prestigious Yang clan of Hongnong, were forced to take orders from these two nobodies. Multiple battles took place between the emperor's entourage and the pursuing army, with both sides suffering heavy casualties and many senior officials killed in the fighting. During the final battle between the two sides, Emperor Xian's camp was attacked by pursuing enemies, forcing him, the empress, and a few other supporters, including Yang Biao, to slip out of camp, battle their way through stampeding soldiers, climb down a rope from a precipice overlooking the Yellow River, and finally escape by ship from the south bank of the Yellow River to the north bank, where they were rescued by Zhang Yang, the governor of Henei Commandery. With Zhang Yang's support, Emperor Xian, reduced to riding in an ox cart, finally reached safety in Anyi in neighboring Hedong Commandery. Emperor Xian's entourage then successfully negotiated a peace settlement with Li Jue and Guo Si, allowing the release of large numbers of captured government officials. At Anyi, Emperor Xian and his ministers were reduced to holding court in the open while common soldiers peeked above the surrounding fences and impudently laughed among themselves. As grain supplies ran low, Emperor Xian's retainers were forced to sustain themselves by foraging for fruits and wild plants. Zhang Yang and Dong Cheng suggested returning the court to Luoyang, but the White Wave leaders who controlled the emperor refused to do so. Yuan Shao, not too far away in Ji province, heavily considered whether or not to bring the emperor under his protection. Ju Shou, one of the most influential of the Ji province local elites and the inspector of Yuan Shao's army, enthusiastically supported bringing the emperor to Ye. In Ju Shou's words, now that Yuan Shao was firmly established in Ji province, he should seek to control the emperor and then use the emperor's influence as leverage against rival warlords. The phrase that Ju Shou used to describe this strategy, a variation of which has become a famous Chinese idiom, was 接天子而令诸侯, or literally, holding the emperor hostage to command the other lords. But other politicians under Yuan Shao, including Guo Tu and Chun Yuqiong, both of whom came from Yingchuan Commandery, opposed Ju Shou's proposal. They argued that having the emperor so close by could unnecessarily make things difficult for Yuan Shao. If Yuan Shao were to obey the emperor, he risked losing his authority, but if he were to disobey the emperor, he risked damaging his reputation. Yuan Shao sided with Guo Tu and Chun Yuqiong and decided against bringing the emperor to Ye. While Yuan Shao is now criticized for his short-sightedness in this situation, he likely had good reasons for doing what he did. Yuan Shao already did not get along well with Emperor Xian. He had after all opposed enthroning Emperor Xian in the first place and later tried to replace Emperor Xian with someone else, and the two likely still had hard feelings for each other. And because Yuan Shao was already the most influential warlord in China, controlling Emperor Xian was unlikely to do much more to boost his authority, but would almost certainly introduce rival political factions to Ye. And finally, Yuan Shao was at the time overstretched militarily, fighting on multiple fronts, and bringing the emperor to Ye would have drained his resources even more. In light of these considerations, it made sense for Yuan Shao to have the emperor close by, at a city like Anyi, without being too close. Ultimately, Yuan Shao was the type of politician who liked to advance his agenda slowly and methodically, with intricate planning, rather than gamble big. And it made sense that he did not want to deal with the potential disruptions that could result from keeping the emperor at Ye. But while this slow and steady approach could lead to tremendous success if all the individual components of a strategy go as planned, such as the complex machinations that allowed Yuan Shao to seize Ji province, it could also lead to catastrophic failure if some components of a strategy do not go as planned, such as when Dong Zhuo entered the capital city, partly on Yuan Shao's invitation, and then surprised everyone by seizing control of the government for himself. Yuan Shao keeping the emperor at Anyi was not in and of itself a bad idea, but only if another warlord does not manage to swoop in and take control of the emperor from under Yuan Shao's nose. Cao Cao also expressed interest in having the emperor join him, but was immediately told no by Dongcheng. In any case, he continued to face opposition across the Central Plains from Yuan Shu and his allies, and providing Emperor Xian with asylum would have also overstretched him. In early 196, Cao Cao launched long-distance offensives against Yellow Turbans in Yingchuan and Runan commanderies who were allied to Yuan Shu, easily defeating them. Yingchuan had some of the most fertile farmlands in the Han Empire, much of it abandoned over the preceding decade. Shortly after his victory over the Yellow Turbans, Cao Cao began to recruit destitute people to work on these farmlands, providing them with cattle, farming tools, and seeds recently captured from the local Yellow Turbans. The farmers in Cao Cao's agricultural colonies, known in Chinese as Tuntian, were taxed exorbitantly. 50% if they provided their own cattle and equipment, or 60% if they leased them from Cao Cao's government. This was in sharp contrast to the typical Eastern Han Dynasty land tax rate of 3.3%, even if other tax obligations made this difference smaller in practical terms. The Tuntian in Yingchuan in 196 was an immediate success, and the model was soon introduced across territories under Cao Cao's control, with civilian colonies in interior regions and military colonies in border regions. As with so many of Cao Cao's policies, the human impact of Tuntian was complicated. On one hand, it did provide countless people with basic security so that they were not starving to death or murdered by marauding armies. But on the other hand, the people in these colonies were forcibly tied to their lands while handing almost all of their surpluses to Cao Cao's government, and they often had little prospects to look forward to outside of just barely staying alive. In a sense, there was nothing special about Cao Cao's agricultural colonies. By that point in Chinese history, the model had already been successfully implemented on a number of occasions, and any warlord with even half of a functioning brain cell could have realized that getting people to work abandoned farmlands was a good idea. But as with so many other things in life, what mattered was not the idea, but the implementation. Setting up Tuntian meant that Cao Cao was committed to methodically rebuilding the economy of his territories rather than seek quick gains through conquest or looting, as his rivals such as Yuan Shu and Lü Bu were more likely to do. It also meant that Cao Cao had the leadership appeal to convince destitute vagabonds to join his farming colonies, as well as the administrative and military setups to collect taxes and minimize desertions. Finally, a system like Tuntian was bound to upset the interests of the land-owning local elites, since they had often been the ones to reap the benefits of the low 3.3% tax rate while collecting much higher rents from their tenants, while also having significant influence in their local governments because of the hundreds, if not thousands, of subservient tenants and slaves they controlled under latifundia. But with Tuntian, Cao Cao effectively created a parallel government and economic ecosystem that competed directly with those of the local elites. Since Cao Cao did not come from an elite Confucian family like many of his rivals did, he was also less hindered by his social obligations to them. A recurrent theme of Cao Cao's career was his harsh treatment of the Confucian scholar aristocrats who dominated late Eastern Han Dynasty politics, and Tuntian was just one of many methods through which Cao Cao did so. In the southeast, Yuan Shu continued to covet all of Yang province in the lower Yangtze basin, although his authority there was mostly limited to its two northernmost commanderies, Jiujiang and Lujiang, both north of the Yangtze. Jiujiang and Lujiang were by far the most densely populated commanderies in Yang province, with a combined 860,000 registered inhabitants in the census of 140. Of the four Yang province commanderies south of the Yangtze, the inland Yuzhang, which corresponded with all of modern-day Jiangxi province, was by far the most populated with 1.7 million registered inhabitants, not to mention those living in remote communities, including Aborigines, who were likely uncounted. Much of Yuzhang's population lived on the marshy floodplains just south of the Yangtze River, as it was an easy stopping point for settlers migrating southward from Jiujiang and Lujiang. Further to the east, Wu Commandery, named after the ancient state of Wu, occupied most of the marshy Yangtze River delta, with a significant percentage of its 700,000 registered inhabitants concentrated in the plains to the east of Lake Tai, around the commandery seat at Wu County, modern-day Suzhou. To the south of Wu Commandery was Kuaiji Commandery, which contained much of the mountainous southeastern Chinese coastline. This vast commandery only had 480,000 registered inhabitants in 140, mostly in its far north. Finally, there was Danyang Commandery, with 630,000 registered inhabitants, centered around modern-day Nanjing, although the city was yet to be founded. Of all the commanderies in Yang province, Danyang best encapsulated the cultural clash that took place between the central government, local elites, and aborigines in these southern borderlands. Danyang consisted mostly of forests and mountains, including the region around Mount Huang, which remains remote today, let alone 1800 years ago. The Aborigines in both Danyang and across the southeast were collectively referred to as the Shan Yue, or the Mountain Yue, with Yue being the generic name the early Chinese dynasties gave to the non-Han Chinese peoples to their south, and is reflected today in the Chinese name for Vietnam, Yunnan, meaning roughly south of Yue. The mountain bandits of Danyang allied with the Aborigines and exploited the region's rich iron and copper resources to form heavily militarized communities that became a significant source of instability. These mountain peoples of Danyang were particularly famous in the late Eastern Han Dynasty for being tough soldiers. Both Cao Cao and Liu Bei had at one point visited the region to recruit soldiers, while Tao Qian, a native of Danyang, had relied heavily on his Danyang soldiers to maintain his authority in Xu province. The four southern commanderies of Yang province were collectively known as Jiangdong, meaning east of the Yangtze, because the Yangtze flows past their territories predominantly in a southwestward to northeastward direction. Today, the Yangtze River takes a sharp bend downstream of Nanjing to empty directly eastward into the sea, and it is this final stretch of the river that gives the Yangtze Delta its modern name, Jiangnan, south of the Yangtze. But 1800 years ago, the Yangtze River significantly widened immediately downstream of where Nanjing is now located, and there was hardly any final latitudinal stretch of the river to speak of. Most Han Dynasty travelers to the Yangtze Delta crossed the Yangtze along a stretch of the river near modern-day Nanjing that flowed almost directly from south to north, and from their perspectives, the delta was to the east of the Yangtze, not south. The exact boundaries of Jiangdong, east of the Yangtze, are ambiguous. Wu, northern Danyang, and northern Kuaiji commanderies were definitely part of Jiangdong, while the rest of southern Yang province might also be included depending on the context. In Jiangdong, Yuan Shu had previously appointed Wu Jing, the brother-in-law of the late Sun Jian, as the governor of Danyang. Wu Jing gave refuge to a scholar official named Liu Yao, the younger brother of Liu Dai, the former inspector of Yan province who had been killed by the Yellow Turbans in 192. But Liu Yao eventually grew powerful enough to kick Wu Jing out of Danyang and then successfully repulsed Wu Jing and Yuan Shu's joint efforts to retake the commandery. By 195, Liu Yao had been appointed the governor of Yang province by the central government under Li Jue and Guo Si, and set up an administration at the city of Qu'a in Wu Commandery that rivaled Yuan Shu's own administration based out of Shouchun. Sun Ce, the eldest son of Sun Jian, had by then reached adulthood. He was born in 175 and spent much of his formative childhood years in Yang province, during which he became close friends with a local boy his age named Zhou Yu from the Zhou clan of Lujiang, one of the great late Eastern Han Dynasty Confucian scholar aristocratic families. Sun Ce, like his father, was leading soldiers in battle at a young age, first fighting under his uncle Wu Jing against the mountain peoples of Danyang, and then directly under Yuan Shu. But by late 195, as he grew increasingly dissatisfied with Yuan Shu's leadership, he finally obtained Yuan Shu's permission to go fight his own campaign in Jiangdong, while still remaining as a subordinate to Yuan Shu. Sun Ce left Shouchun with little more than 1,000 of his father's former soldiers, although his ranks quickly grew to almost 6,000 strong with new recruits. He joined Wu Jing on the west bank of the Yangtze and, with the support of Zhou Yu, successfully established a bridgehead on the east bank. Sun Ce was well liked by his soldiers, maintained good discipline in his army, and decisive in battle, allowing him to quickly gain authority over the entire invading army, including his uncle Wu Jing. Sun Ce advanced rapidly against Liu Yao, capturing Qu'a by early 196. In one encounter, Sun Ce was at the head of 13 other riders when they encountered Liu Yao's subordinate Taishi Ci, scouting the area with only one other rider. Taishi Ci charged Sun Ce, after which the two fought hand-to-hand, with Sun Ce eventually capturing Taishi Ci's hand halberd, while Taishi Ci captured Sun Ce's helmet. In Qu'a, Sun Ce's ranks quickly swelled to over 20,000 strong. After regrouping to establish a rudimentary administration in Qu'a, Sun Ce continued his southward expansion. He easily took Wu Commandery when Zhu Zhi, a family friend of the Sun's who controlled its local army, munied against the governor there. Sun Ce's army then easily defeated that of Wang Lang, the governor of Kuaiji Commandery, who was a well-regarded Confucian scholar but not much of a soldier, allowing him to occupy the densely populated northern tip of Kuaiji Commandery. Wang Lang fled southward by sea to the mountainous, sparsely populated southern Kuaiji, where he finally surrendered to Sun Ce. But despite his rapidly conquering the core parts of Jiangdong in less than a year, Sun Ce still faced significant opposition in the region. Most of southern Kuaiji remained outside of his direct control, all while Liu Yao had set up a new base in Yuzhang Commandery, with Taishi Ci serving as a buffer in southern Danyang. Local bandits hostile to Sun Ce continued to roam large regions of the countryside. Many local elites, especially in Wu Commandery, remained hostile to Sun Ce's rule, pushing Sun Ce to kill off many of them. As Sun Ce was making progress in Jiangdong, Yuan Shu was also fighting against Liu Bei in southwestern Xu province. Yuan Shu promised to give Lü Bu grain supplies if he would betray Liu Bei. Lü Bu, used to switching sides by now, seized Liu Bei's base at Xiapi. Liu Bei, suddenly finding himself trapped between Yuan Shu and Lü Bu, suffered multiple defeats and was forced to surrender to Lü Bu, who had also broken with Yuan Shu because the promised grain supplies never arrived. Lü Bu accepted Liu Bei's surrender and sent Liu Bei back to Xiaopei, where he had previously been during Tao Qian's governorship. In the summer of 196, famine also broke out at the court in Anyi, forcing Emperor Xian to again seek out Zhang Yang's protection in nearby Henei Commandery. With Zhang Yang's guidance, the emperor finally returned to Luoyang after a 6-year-long absence. The city remained in ruins, weeds covered its streets, and few houses remained standing. Government officials had to take up shelter in heavily damaged buildings. Some officials were forced to personally collect firewood in the outskirts of the city. Some starved to death, and some were murdered by ill-disciplined soldiers. Zhang Yang returned to Henei while Yang Feng garrisoned himself to the southeast of Luoyang. Another white-wave general, Han Xian, seized control of the court. Han Xian completely overstepped his boundaries by taking for himself the title Da Jiangjun, the General-in-Chief, a highly prestigious position normally reserved for the emperor's regent. He also took on the role of the Sili Xiaowei, the colonel director of the retainers. Sili was the central administrative region around Luoyang and Chang'an, and the colonel director of the retainers was responsible for auditing the performances of all government officials in the Sili region, including those in the central government. Serving in these two official positions effectively made Han Xian, who up until then was a political nobody, the most powerful figure in the central government. Cao Cao, only 160 kilometers away from Luoyang in Yingchuan Commandery, continued to make overtures to the court, offering to bring much-needed grain supplies from his most recent harvest to the capital city. And as infighting worsened among the leadership in Luoyang, Dongcheng, who remained active in the court, also had enough of Han Xian's domineering politics and decided to invite Cao Cao to Luoyang with a secret message, not the only one he would send out in his career. Cao Cao soon arrived in Luoyang with his army and then openly denounced Han Xian, causing Han Xian to flee Luoyang and join Yang Feng. With a top leadership position in Luoyang now vacant, the emperor granted Cao Cao both the position of the colonel director of the retainers and the control of the imperial secretariat, effectively giving Cao Cao control of the central government. But with Yang Feng and Han Xian still threatening to retake the emperor with their nearby army, Cao Cao's control of the central government was precarious at best. Cao Cao informed Yang Feng and Han Xian that because of difficulties in transporting grain from Yingchuan to Luoyang, the court should temporarily relocate to a midway point to ease the pressures on the supply chain. But once Emperor Xian and his entourage left Luoyang, Cao Cao suddenly changed direction, rushed the emperor to the city of Xu in Yingchuan Commandery before Yang Feng and Han Xian could intercept them, and then placed the emperor under his direct military protection. Cao Cao was subsequently promoted to the general-in-chief. He also quickly defeated both Yang Feng and Han Xian in battle, finally securing his control of the emperor and the central government. Emperor Xian, likely with Cao Cao's permission, issued an edict to Yuan Shao, berating him for spending the previous few years on self-aggrandizement rather than coming to the emperor's aid like Cao Cao had done. Cao Cao also offered Yuan Shao the role of the Grand Commandant. Yuan Shao grew furious at the whole sequence of events. How dare Cao Cao suddenly boss him around after years of subservience? Cao Cao, for his part, was worried of triggering Yuan Shao too much, and so made amends by abdicating his role as general-in-chief to Yuan Shao, while officially taking on the less prestigious role of the Excellency of Works, one of the three excellencies. Cao Cao continued to tighten his control over the central government, appointing both Xun Yu and his nephew Xun You to important positions in the imperial secretariat. Xun Yu also recommended to Cao Cao two other talented scholars from Yingchuan, Guo Jia, who went on to become a key advisor to Cao Cao, and Zhong Yao. Cao Cao, from this point onwards, became the poster child of holding the emperor hostage to command the other lords. Many of his rival warlords, such as Lü Bu and Yuan Shu, realistically could not have cared less that Cao Cao controlled the emperor, but that is beyond the point. People like Lü Bu and Yuan Shu still needed the support of their subordinates, and Cao Cao could now win them over much more easily through shifting alliances, timely defections, or negotiated surrenders by promising them official positions under the central government. Additionally, many of Cao Cao's subordinates, such as Xun Yu, still held significant reverence for the Han Dynasty, and so controlling the government helped Cao Cao to secure their loyalties. But ultimately, as Cao Cao's power grew, his control of Emperor Xian would go on to become a growing farce. It was always going to be a fine line between a powerful minister controlling the emperor to restore the dynasty versus controlling the emperor to serve his personal ambitions. And for every year that Cao Cao did not relinquish his powers, the more he became a target for his enemies to rally against. All this, though, would be for much later. In the winter of 196, Cao Cao was still a rising warlord with enemies in multiple directions, and he needed every bit of help he could find just to survive the following summer. By the winter of 196 to 197, another twist took place in the Far Eastern menage a trois between Yuan Shu, Lü Bu, and Liu Bei, causing Liu Bei to join forces with Cao Cao. Cao Cao appointed Liu Bei as the governor of Yu province, with the emperor's official stamp of approval, of course, and had Liu Bei stationed in Pei Principality to serve as a buffer against Lü Bu. In the northwest, the situation in Guanzhong continued to deteriorate as a number of petty warlords, including Li Jue, Guo Si, and Zhang Ji, fought for control over the region. In late 196, Zhang Ji's army ran low on grain supplies, forcing him to lead his soldiers southeastward out of Guanzhong to launch raids into Nanyang Commandery. Zhang Ji was killed by a stray arrow in the subsequent fighting, after which his nephew Zhang Xiu took control of his army. Zhang Xiu initially submitted to Liu Biao, the governor of Jing province, but when Cao Cao invaded Nanyang a few months later in early 197, he readily shifted his allegiance to Cao Cao and the central government instead. Cao Cao, carried away by the string of successes he had enjoyed over the previous 2 years, thought it was a good idea to take Zhang Ji's widow as a concubine, making Zhang Xiu feel humiliated. But less scandalous, while perhaps just as important, Cao Cao sent gifts to one of Zhang Xiu's key subordinates, causing Zhang Xiu to worry that he might soon be purged. Zhang Xiu subsequently launched a devastating surprise attack against Cao Cao, whose oldest son and heir apparent Cao Ang was killed in the fighting. Cao Cao barely escaped with his life. After returning to Xu from Nanyang in early 197, Cao Cao was forced to temporarily redirect his attention westward toward Guanzhong, which was now being invaded by the far northwestern warlords Ma Teng and Han Sui, and the chaos there threatened to spill over eastward into Cao Cao's own territories. Cao Cao appointed Zhong Yao as the colonel director of the retainers, and then sent him westward to Guanzhong to restore imperial authority there. Zhong Yao set up his base in Chang'an and, despite having little local support to rely on, still managed to successfully make peace with Ma Teng and Han Sui to establish a critically important western buffer region for Cao Cao. The fighting nonetheless continued in and around Guanzhong, with both Li Jue and Guo Si killed by their subordinates over the next few years. To the southeast of Cao Cao, Yuan Shu continued to grow rapidly, and by late 196, he controlled most of Yang province, large parts of Yu province, and was encroaching heavily into Lü Bu's Xu province. He began to consider declaring himself emperor, perhaps influenced by a feeling of destiny that he derived from controlling the Great Seal of State, a key symbol of imperial authority carved out of precious jade and which had been passed through Chinese ruling families for centuries. Many of Yuan Shu's subordinates, including Sun Ce, vehemently opposed this idea, but Yuan Shu did not listen. In early 197, he declared himself the emperor of a new dynasty named Zhong. Yuan Shu's fortunes immediately took a nosedive after he became emperor. He offered Lü Bu a marriage alliance, which the capricious Lü Bu initially accepted before changing his mind. Yuan Shu retaliated by launching a massive invasion of Xu province, only to be routed by Lü Bu's counterattacks. Sun Ce, along with his numerous allies such as Wu Jing and Zhou Yu, collectively revolted against Yuan Shu, causing Yuan Shu to immediately lose all of his territory south of the Yangtze. Cao Cao again took advantage of his control of the emperor by granting Sun Ce official recognition from the central government. As Yuan Shu's position continued to deteriorate, Cao Cao attacked Yuan Shu in late 197, easily conquering Yuan Shu's remaining territories to the north of the Huai River. Yuan Shu, still technically a self-declared emperor, was left with little more than a realm state between the Huai and Yangtze rivers centered around Shouchun. But despite the sudden collapse of his fortunes, Yuan Shu continued to live lavishly while brutally oppressing the declining populace who remained under his control. After defeating Yuan Shu, Cao Cao redirected his efforts southwestward toward Zhang Xiu, who remained a significant threat because of Nanyang's proximity to Xu and Zhang Xiu's renewed alliance with Liu Biao. Cao Cao invaded Nanyang 2 more times from late 197 to 198, but was repulsed both times. In mid-198, Lü Bu renewed his on-again, off-again alliance with Yuan Shu. He captured Pei, forcing Liu Bei to flee westward. He also allied with bandits around Mount Tai under the influential bandit leader Zhang Ba. With these moves, he threatened to again form a coalition in the Far East that could challenge Cao Cao, who had also had enough of Lü Bu's unpredictability and decided to end Lü Bu once and for all. With the support of Liu Bei, Cao Cao launched a long-distance expedition against Xu province and quickly besieged Lü Bu at Xiapi, first digging a trench around Xiapi to prevent Lü Bu from escaping, and later diverting the waters of the nearby rivers to flood the city. As the situation in Xiapi grew desperate in early 199, Lü Bu's subordinates turned over the city to Cao Cao. Lü Bu was captured and offered to surrender to Cao Cao, who was tempted by the offer, since after all, Lü Bu was still one of the premier cavalry commanders of the day, until he remembered that Lü Bu had already betrayed just about every lord he served under. Cao Cao had Lü Bu strangled to death. Chen Gong, who had been fighting alongside Lü Bu since betraying Cao Cao in 194, was also killed. Although Lü Bu was only briefly active in history, he was nonetheless a larger-than-life character whose unpredictability set in motion many events during the fall of the Eastern Han Dynasty. As a warlord, he was comically bad at the usual tasks of building an administration, maintaining alliances, and securing food supplies, but somehow compensated for all of these deficiencies with his military prowess alone. Over the ensuing centuries, as the military commanders from this time period became reimagined as warriors with superhuman fighting abilities, Lü Bu stands out as the greatest warrior of them all, riding on his famed red hare horse and carrying his signature crescent moon halberd in battle. His character in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms is highly flawed. Aside from his assassination of the tyrant Dong Zhuo, which in any case is fueled by lust rather than any greater sense of duty, Lü Bu is avaricious, treacherous, and ultimately cowardly in the face of death. But despite all of this, he remains one of the most enduringly popular characters from the novel. There is just something inherently enthralling about a brash, mercurial, and good-looking warrior who routinely kills his enemies in single combat, does not care about what others think of him, and might just be a little bit crazy. With Lü Bu's death, Cao Cao removed his biggest remaining threat in the Central Plains. Lü Bu's subordinate Zhang Liao, who was likely away from Xiapi at the time of Lü Bu's final defeat, surrendered to Cao Cao. Zhang Ba also surrendered to Cao Cao and was granted semi-autonomous rule along the far eastern coast of Xu province, since the region was too far away for Cao Cao to control effectively. While Cao Cao was quickly bringing the Central Plains together under his control, Yuan Shao was rapidly bringing the far north together under him. In Qing province, after many years of bitter fighting, Yuan Shao's son Yuan Tan finally conquered most of the province by kicking out both Tian Kai, who fled north to join his old ally Gongsun Zan, and Kong Rong, a highly regarded Confucian scholar and the chancellor of Beihai Principality, who fled to join Cao Cao in the central government. Gongsun Zan had also been undergoing a downward spiral since his murder of the widely popular Liu Yu in 193. A number of Liu Yu's former subordinates, including Xian Yufu, revolted against Gongsun Zan. Gongsun Zan's rule in Yu province was also highly oppressive, turning more and more of the population against him. He continued to wage wars against Yuan Shao, suffering more and more setbacks in the process. As Gongsun Zan's rule in Yu province collapsed, he was reduced to hiding out in a fortress named Yijing that he had built for himself and stocked with an enormous grain supply. In the winter of 198 to 199, Yuan Shao's army besieged Yijing, and soon an allied relief force consisting of the Black Mountain bandits under Zhang Yan and Gongsun Zan's son attempted to lift the siege. Gongsun Zan and the relief forces tried to coordinate a joint attack against Yuan Shao with a beacon as the attack signal, but Yuan Shao's forces intercepted their communication. On the appointed date and time, Yuan Shao's soldiers set up the beacon to lure Gongsun Zan out of Yijing and then crushed him in an ambush. Yuan Shao's soldiers subsequently dug tunnels under the fortifications of Yijing to destroy it bit by bit. As Yijing was on the verge of falling, Gongsun Zan finally accepted that all was lost. He murdered his whole family and then killed himself. Tian Kai was also killed in the subsequent fighting. By early 199, with the rapid defeat of both Gongsun Zan and Lü Bu, Yuan Shao and Cao Cao suddenly found themselves as the two main surviving warlords in northern China. Yuan Shao had previously been far more powerful than Cao Cao, but in just a few short years from 196 to 199, Cao Cao had not only developed rapidly to become Yuan Shao's near equal, but with his control of the emperor, was threatening to overtake Yuan Shao's position as the leading warlord in China. As he witnessed Cao Cao's steady growth, Yuan Shao began to regret not bringing the emperor to Ye, and tried to pressure Cao Cao into relocating the court from Xu to Juancheng, on the south bank of the Yellow River and close to Yuan Shao's own territories. Cao Cao laughed off Yuan Shao's proposal. Tian Feng, another one of the prominent Hebei elites serving under Yuan Shao, suggested for Yuan Shao to launch a surprise attack against Xu to kidnap the emperor. Yuan Shao ignored Tian Feng's advice, probably because despite Tian Feng's popularity as a brilliant advisor thanks to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, his suggestion to Yuan Shao was in fact quite stupid. On another occasion, Yuan Shao demanded that Cao Cao execute two prominent politicians whom Yuan Shao did not like: Yang Biao, the former Grand Commandant who remained politically influential, and Kong Rong, the former chancellor of Beihai Principality, who continued to criticize Yuan Shao while remaining safely under Cao Cao's protection. Cao Cao did not like these two either, but why should he risk damaging his own reputation to do Yuan Shao's bidding? Cao Cao again said no. As tensions worsened between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao, war was becoming increasingly likely. Cao Cao made the first move. In 198, during Cao Cao's eastern expedition against Lü Bu, Zhang Yang, Yuan Shao's longtime ally in Henei, was assassinated by his subordinates, leaving behind a power vacuum immediately north of the Yellow River within Yuan Shao's sphere of influence. After defeating Lü Bu, Cao Cao immediately took his army across the Yellow River to occupy a bridgehead in southern Henei. Soon afterwards, as Yuan Shu's situation in Shouchun grew more desperate, he finally made peace with his brother cousin Yuan Shao and tried to join him in Hebei. Had the two not wasted so much resources fighting one another over the previous decade, their family probably would have conquered China multiple times over by then. But at least better late than never, right? Yuan Shao sent Yuan Tan southward to rescue Yuan Shu, only for the relief mission to be repulsed by Liu Bei, who remained under Cao Cao's command. Yuan Shu, stuck in his diminishing domain while watching helplessly as his ambitions crumbled before him, grew ill and died in the summer of 199. His remaining territories around Shouchun were soon absorbed by Cao Cao. While Cao Cao and Yuan Shao were busy consolidating their powers in the north, Sun Ce also continued to expand in Jiangdong, especially since his chief rival Liu Yao had died of illness in Yuzhang in 198. Sun Ce first invaded southern Danyang and defeated Taishi Ci, who surrendered to Sun Ce and then went on to become an important military commander under the Sun family. Taishi Ci died of illness in 206, although in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he is killed heroically in battle, a much more fitting end, perhaps, for such a talented soldier. Sun Ce continued to expand up the Yangtze River, conquering Lujiang commandery in a surprise attack, again with the help of Zhou Yu, whose family came from Lujiang. As Sun Ce's success grew, Liu Biao, whose Jing province was not much further upriver, became wary of him. Liu Biao's general Huang Zu, who had previously killed Sun Ce's father in battle in 191, sailed a fleet down the Yangtze River to intervene against Sun Ce, only to suffer a crushing defeat. Sun Ce and Zhou Yu subsequently sailed their joint fleets up the Yangtze River into Jing province to again inflict heavy defeats against Huang Zu. After Huang Zu's defeat, Sun Ce turned his attention southward toward Yuzhang commandery, governed by another well-regarded scholar named Hua Xin. With most of the southeast already under Sun Ce's control, Hua Xin had little choice but to surrender to Sun Ce. By 199, Sun Ce, still only 24 years old, had conquered a vast domain for himself in a little over 4 years. The most illustrious warlords were beginning to treat him as an equal. Cao Cao offered him a marriage alliance. But despite Sun Ce's rapidly growing prominence, he was still little more than just an upstart regional leader, and he still had trouble securing the acceptance of the empire's top elites. Both Hua Xin and Wang Lang, the former governor of Kuaiji Commandery, whom Sun Ce had taken prisoner back in 196, turned down positions in Sun Ce's administration and then found excuses to return to the central government in the north, where the heart of traditional Chinese political legitimacy still rested. Hua Xin and Wang Lang both lived to ripe old ages in the 220s and 230s, and went on to become prominent politicians under Cao Cao and his successors. Sun Ce, for his part, was likely happy to see people like Hua Xin and Wang Lang leave for the north. His immediate priority was to establish a secure domain for himself in the remote southeastern marches, and it was in his best interest to keep snooty northerners such as Hua Xin and Wang Lang as far away as possible. In the north, Cao Cao again provoked Yuan Shao by personally leading an army across the Yellow River in the autumn of 199 and driving all the way north to Liyang, only 90 kilometers south of Ye, while also directing Zhang Ba to attack Yuan Shao's far eastern territories. But before Yuan Shao could retaliate, Cao Cao again withdrew southward across the Yellow River to Xu, leaving behind a defensive force to wait for the inevitable onslaught at a site named Guandu.